Lady Banks rose blooms exactly once a year, one time. And in that one bloom, a single mature plant can carry close to 100,000 flowers, all opening at once, all spilling over the structure like a yellow waterfall. That's only number 7 on this list, because this video isn't just about vines that look pretty. It's about vines that solve specific garden problems: flat fences, exposed porch rails, empty arches, blank walls, and gardens that need height without feeling crowded. These are 13 climbing vines worth actually planting. Some are familiar, some are harder to find. And the final vine on this list is the only one I know that can actually look more intentional the longer you let it grow, which is the opposite of how most vines behave. Let's start at number 13. Number 13, Major Wheeler Coral Honeysuckle, designed to exclude bees. If you've been trying to get hummingbirds into your yard and nothing's working, the problem might not be your feeders. It's that most vines people plant weren't designed for hummingbirds at all. Major Wheeler was. This is Lonicera sempervirens, native coral honeysuckle, zones 4 through 9. Not invasive, no runners. The flowers are red, tubular, and nearly scentless. Hummingbirds navigate by sight, not smell, and red is the color they're built to find. The tube is long enough that bees can't reach the nectar, but a hummingbird's bill fits exactly. The plant pulls in the right visitor and keeps everything else out. Botanists call this pollination syndrome, the idea that flower color and shape tell you which animal it evolved to attract. Red plus tubular always points to hummingbird. You'll see it come up again later in this list. Blooms spring into fall. Stays where you plant it. Easy to find at most nurseries. The trade-off? It won't stop traffic the way a fragrant honeysuckle does. For a vine that actually works for wildlife, that's a fair exchange. Number 12. Kintzley's ghost honeysuckle. Leaves turn silver first. Most vines give you green all season. Kintzley's ghost gives you green, and then, right when it's about to bloom, the leaves at the tips shift to a dusty silver blue, like the plant is running a second act before the flowers even open. It's a native-R honeysuckle, zones 4 through 8. Not invasive, won't run. At bloom time, the terminal leaves fuse around the stem and go pale silver. The flowers that push through are small and creamy yellow. They bring in butterflies and hummingbirds. 2 different visual moments out of one vine. Growth is moderate. It won't race up a fence in a single season, which makes it a lot easier to keep in shape than some of the others on this list. One practical note. It's harder to find than Major Wheeler. You'll likely need a specialty native nursery or an online source to track it down. Number 11. Peaches and Cream Honeysuckle. Bred mildew-proof, twice beautiful. Every gardener who's grown a honeysuckle before has seen it, that white, powdery coating that shows up midsummer and makes the plant look like it's dying. Peaches and Cream was specifically bred to skip that. Zones 5 through 9. Compact habit, so it won't run 20 feet in a season. For a gate arch or a short fence section, that's actually useful. You're training it, not chasing it. The flowers come in 2 colors, magenta on the outside, and when they open fully, creamy white inside. You get a different look depending on where you are in the bloom. Spring into early summer, the foliage holds up clean through the rest of the year. Powdery mildew resistance was a specific breeding goal on this cultivar, not a side benefit, the whole point. If you need fast coverage across a large area, this isn't the right pick. For anything smaller in scale, it earns its spot. Number 10. Carolina Jasmine. Toxic? Ask the right question. Carolina Jasmine comes up in almost every conversation about fragrant native vines. And then someone mentions it's toxic, and half the room hesitates. Here's what that actually means for your yard. Gelsemium sempervirens, southeast native, zones 6 through 9. It's evergreen and the state wildflower of South Carolina. Bright yellow flowers in spring and the fragrance is the kind that carries across the yard. Bees and butterflies work it consistently. Along a fence, it reaches 15 to 20 feet. Prune it once or twice a year to hold the width. The toxicity question is worth addressing once. Gelsemium sempervirens contains alkaloids that can cause harm if ingested, flowers and roots especially. Daffodil bulbs are toxic. So is oleander, which lines road medians all across the southeast. Nobody avoids those plants because the exposure pathway isn't there for most people. If you have young children or a dog that choose plants, check the ASPCA, Animal Poison Control Center database. For adult yards, the risk is low. NC Extension Gardener Plant Toolbox has the species breakdown. Leave it without attention, and it will push where you don't want it. A guide wire on a post and 2 cuts a year keeps that in check. Number 9. Razmataz grapevine. Fruit, shade, zero fuss. This one's different from everything else on this list. It gives you fruit. Not a lot of fruit, but a vine that covers a structure and feeds birds all summer isn't a bad thing to have. Razmataz is a seedless muscadine hybrid developed in North Carolina, zones 7 through 9. The grapes are smaller than you'd expect from a muscadine thin skin, sweet, edible. You'll eat a few. Birds get the rest. It's an aggressive grower once it finds its footing. On a pergola, a garden shed, a back wall it covers. The foliage stays clean and ornamental even when there's nothing to harvest. Maintenance is minimal. If your goal is actually harvesting a meaningful amount of grapes, this isn't the right vine for that. Prune it back in late winter. Skip that, and you'll be negotiating with it all season. Number 8. Evergreen Wisteria, Wisteria drama. Zero foundation damage. If you love what wisteria looks like hanging over a pergola, but you've heard the horror stories about roots destroying foundations, Evergreen Wisteria is the version of that conversation you actually want to have. This is Millettia reticulata, also listed as Calaria reticulata depending on where you're shopping. Zones 8 through 10. Semi-evergreen to fully evergreen. The flowers are cascading, fragrant, purple-pink, and they arrive in late summer and fall after most flowering vines on this list have already finished for the season. Here's what matters. This is not the same plant as the wisteria that takes over porches and lifts foundations. Wisteria sinensis is the one with the aggressive root system. Millettia reticulata behaves differently, less pushy. No foundation issues on record. Harder to source. Specialty nurseries are the more reliable option. Zone restriction is real. Zones 8 through 10 only. Zone 7 gardeners should look elsewhere on this list. Number 7. Lady Banks Rose. Once a year, 100,000 flowers. Lady Banks Rose blooms exactly once a year. Before you skip it, a single mature plant can put out close to 100,000 flowers in that one bloom, all at the same time. This is a vining rose, zones 6 through 9. Thornless, the yellow variety especially. The yellow has no fragrance, which is fair to mention up front. The white variety carries a light scent. Blooms in early spring, March into April. Complete coverage. Cascading clusters from top to bottom. One thing this rose does that most other vines don't, when it runs out of support, it falls back downward rather than pushing outward. Train it over an arbor, and the growth from the top hangs back toward the ground. It closes the space from above. Very different from a vine that keeps reaching sideways. On the once-a-year question, early spring is actually the one gap most gardens have, March and April, before almost anything else wakes up. One bloom that covers everything completely is a different calculation. It gets large. Over 20 feet is typical on an established plant. It needs a real structure. One critical note on timing. Cut it back after it finishes, not before. This rose blooms on old wood. Take it down in late winter, and you'll have a clean vine with 0 flowers come spring. Number 6. Star Jasmine. Why it smells stronger at dusk. If you have a front porch rail that feels exposed, people can see straight through from, The street star jasmine is the plant that solves that without making your porch feel like a wall. This is Trachelospermum jasminoides, zones 8 through 10, or zone 7B planted against a foundation for protection. Evergreen, white pinwheel flowers in spring, some residual through summer. In winter, the leaves turn a light purple, not dead, just dormant adjacent, and green back fully by spring. For a porch rail, a low fence, or a narrow horizontal run, this is the plant. It fills in along the structure rather than climbing past it. The scent has a specific behavior. The primary compound is called linalool. It stays close rather than carrying across a yard. The smell intensifies in the evening because that's when the pollinators it evolved for are most active. Plant it within 10 to 15 feet of a seeding area for the full effect. Zone 7 winters will knock it back. Established plants against a foundation usually come through. New plantings in Zone 7 need a sheltered spot. Number 5. Climbing hydrangea. Doing nothing is doing right. Climbing hydrangea has a reputation for doing nothing for years after you plant it. That reputation is completely accurate. And it's also the most misunderstood thing about this plant. Hydrangea anomala petiolaris, zones 4 through 8. Worth noting, this is not a good fit for hot, humid zone 8 in the southeast. It does better in zones 4 through 7. Self-clinging. Can reach 30 to 40 feet on a tree or a masonry wall. White lace cap flowers in May and June, scented. Good yellow color in fall. The bark develops a shaggy, interesting texture. Through winter, this plant earns its spot in the garden year-round. There's a name for what this plant does in its first few years. Sleep, creep, leap. Year 1, nothing above ground. Year 2, minimal movement. Year 3 and beyond, the plant starts going. Missouri Botanical Garden and Penn State Extension document the timeline for first significant growth, or flowers at 3 to 7 years in good conditions. One gardener in this community waited 14 years. Drought had been resetting the clock every single season, pushing energy back to the roots rather than upward. Once conditions improved, the plant moved. The key requirement is consistent moisture. This is not a plant that tolerates dry spells. Number 4. Tangerine Beauty Crossvine, timed for hummingbird migration. If you want the single most reliable vine for bringing hummingbirds back to your yard in spring when they're migrating through and need fuel, Tangerine Beauty is that plant. This is Bignonia capreolata, Tangerine Beauty, native to the southeast. Zones 6 through 9. Semi-evergreen. The flowers are orange-red, tubular, opening right as ruby-throated hummingbirds move north through the southeast in spring. The NC Arboretum selected and introduced this variety in the 1980s. It's still in the trade today, though it takes some hunting to find. It moves quickly, 6 to 10 feet in a season once it settles in. A fence, a wall, a garden arch, it gets there. The leaves take on a purple tint through fall and winter and look presentable even when nothing is blooming. Speed plus wildlife value in one plant. This is the strongest option on the list for that combination. Availability is the one real limitation. Native plant nurseries and online retailers are the more reliable places to track it down. Number 3. Taiga Clematis. Hard cut means more blooms. Most clematis gives you a few spectacular weeks and then it's done. Taiga runs from late spring into fall, different flower forms across the same plant, on the same season. Clematis taiga. Type 3, also called Group 3, zones 4 through 9. What makes this one different is that the flowers don't all look the same. Over the season, you get semi-double blooms, open singles, and small knotting forms, all on the same vine, in sequence. It's genuinely variable from late spring well into fall. Type 3 clematis blooms on new wood. To get the most out of it, cut it down hard in late winter to 12 to 18 inches from the ground. Most people hear that and hesitate. But old growth wasn't going to produce flowers anyway. Cutting it off redirects all the plant's energy into new season growth, and that new growth blooms. The harder the cut, the better the result. The base does best with shade. The top needs sun. Keep the base shaded with mulch or surrounding plants. Let the top climb into open light. That's how clematis grows in the wild. Roots in forest floor shadow. Vines reaching toward the canopy. It picks up speed every season. Year 1 is modest. Year 2 and 3, it starts going. Type 3 is also the most forgiving type for beginners. You can't really cut it too hard. Number 2. Madison Confederate Jasmine. Same plant, one hidden trick. There are thousands of nurseries across the Southeast growing Confederate jasmine. Almost none of them are growing this version, and the reason is genuinely puzzling. Because the only difference is that this one does something extra. Trachelospermum jasminoides, Madison. Zones 7 through 10. More cold tolerant than the standard variety, which matters if you're in zone 7B or lower. The spring bloom is identical to regular Confederate jasmine, the same white pinwheel flowers, the same strong scent. For most of the season, you can't tell them apart. What changes is what happens after the flowers finish. Madison set seed pods that eventually split open and release fine, silky white threads like the inside of a small milkweed pod lifting into the air. It adds 6 to 8 weeks of visual interest after the bloom ends. Most people walking past haven't seen it before. Viewers in Zone 8A, Mississippi, report that Madison doesn't die back in winter, while the standard variety at the same site goes to the ground entirely. That's a real difference in Zone 7B. It costs a bit more. Worth it. The scent comes from linalool, the same compound as the star jasmine at number 6 on this list. Terpene ratios shift slightly between cultivars close, but not identical to every nose. When you're buying, ask for Madison specifically. Independent garden centers are more likely to carry it than chain stores. Big box stores rarely stock named cultivars. Zone 7B winters may push it back. It tends to come through. Number 1. Clematis armandii. Runs out of room, hangs down. Every vine on this list requires some version of the same conversation. Where do I put the guide wires? How do I get it started in the right direction? What happens when it reaches the end of the structure? Number 1 makes that conversation shorter than you'd expect. 13 vines down to 1. Clematis armandii earns this position not because of what it looks like when everything's going right, but because of what it does when it runs out of room. This is an evergreen clematis, zones 7 through 9. White flowers in spring scented, finishing by late April on most properties. The leaves are thick, 4 to 6 inches long, with a tropical look. The plant keeps them through winter when most of the other vines on this list have either dropped their leaves or started looking rough. Here's what makes it different from everything else. When it reaches the far end of a support and has nothing left to grab. It doesn't start reaching sideways or outward the way most vines do. It hangs down. The growth that extends past the end of the support falls toward the ground in a long, soft drape. Train it across the top of a fence or a horizontal arbor beam, and the effect is weeping natural coverage that falls downward from above, enclosing the space below without any engineering. Most vines in that position look like they're trying to escape. This one looks like it's settling into place. A plant in the ground for a year or two will already be showing this. Once the roots are settled, the behavior gets stronger every season. Zone 7 in an exposed spot carries some risk of winter dieback. Up against a wall or a sheltered structure, it handles it. That's number 1. And if there's a vine you think should have made this list, drop it in the comments. 13 vines. And there are plenty this list didn't reach. Some are regional, some just didn't fit this time. If you have a climbing vine that's done well in your yard and belongs on a list like this, leave a comment. Good to hear what people are actually growing out there. Thanks for watching.